We're going to start off very briefly with a reminder of where we came from. So we had our first meeting away from this building in the European Commission in Brussels, and we've created a short 2-minute video, and I just thought it was worthwhile showing you the seeds of the Agile Aging Alliance. So Dave, could you please run the video? This day is a compendium of what we've been doing during the course of this year. We've organized 10 roadshows across Europe, taking stock of the interests of stakeholders from different disciplines that are interested in age-friendly homes and housing. And we've been meeting with academics, we've been meeting with industrialists, SMEs, and people from local authorities, local government, national government, because we are working towards what the European Commission is calling a reference framework for age-friendly housing. With this project, we are sowing seeds. That's what we're doing. We're pulling the right people together with fertile imaginations, and we're throwing ideas out there, and it's up to them to take those ideas and see what happens. And then they feed back to us, and that's exactly what we saw today. You know, people feeding back bigger ideas than we shared, and then we'll take those bigger ideas and we'll move them out again. So it's a very organic process. It's a very rewarding process for those people that are within, because you can attend these kind of events. You get lots of talking heads saying the same thing, what we call the usual suspects. And what we've managed to achieve with this project is a lot of unusual suspects that are bringing fresh ideas to the space. And more importantly, we've got young unusual suspects that are coming in and saying, hey, we want to do something for our older selves. We're not talking about the elderly and them over there. We're talking about our futures. So we have to do something about it. And this is what we're willing to do.
Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot. I'm really, really excited to be here today with you. And as Ian has said, we have been discussing for half a year, almost a bit more than half a year. And during those discussions, we have seen that the alignment of the agendas that we are pursuing makes a lot of sense to see ways to collaborate. I cannot say exactly now. I can see my presentation. So what we are here to present today is the role of UN Habitat. I hope some of you know what UN Habitat is, but otherwise we will also get the chance to describe what UN Habitat is doing and how we work. We are the United Nations Human Settlement Program. So we work with cities, with national governments to move ahead with the implementation of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, of the New Urban Agenda. And what we see today and what you see in the screen is the main challenges that urbanization, that climate are bringing, are questions that relate very much to what we are discussing today. In order to have neighborhoods that are going to be inclusive, that are going to be multigenerational, that are going to be vibrant, as Ian was explaining, we also need today to address some of these challenges that can come as opportunities. But we need to look specifically, and after the 2 years that we have been that we have experienced, we need to look at how our neighborhoods deal with health and how the health function originally a consideration from urban planning. Urban planning is, as many of you know, started from the perspective of how cities could be more healthy. The second one is the climate action, the climate change, and all the vulnerability issues that it creates, specifically for vulnerable groups, specifically for priority groups that suffer more, that are more exposed to climate change, to high temperatures, to heat island effects in the cities. So those neighborhoods of the future need to take this very much into account. The digital transformation was already mentioned. So Ian was talking about it, and it is crucial that this digital transformation happens in an inclusive manner, that those technologies are inserted in a way that different groups of population can use it. And the last one, which maybe is something that it has not been brought, as you said, unusual suspects. Rapid urbanization is something that is not a characteristic of a few countries where we work, but indeed where we are based in sub-Saharan Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, we see that rapid urbanization has a very strong influence in how cities and how neighborhoods are shaped. And therefore, we need to bring it or take it very much into account. How do we design the cities or the other part of the cities in developing countries is also going to have a huge influence in how the neighborhoods of the future will look like. You see here, and that refers to what I was explaining before, the growth, the population growth and how it's happening by region. And 68% of the world's population is expected to live in cities, so a lot of opportunity also to shape those cities in the right manner. 60% of the places that we will be inhabiting are not yet built. So that means that it is not just about improving the neighborhoods that we have, but also knowing how to design the neighborhoods of the future, because 60% of them are not yet built. And then something that is very crucial for our work, the discussions that we have had with AAA, is that inequality that has very severe implications in how neighborhoods work, how people live in neighborhoods, how safe they are, how inclusive they are. It's rising, and it is rising globally. 75% of cities are today less equal than 2 decades ago. So that means that there is a current dynamic that we really need to take into account. About UN Habitat, about our agency, as I said, we are the United Nations Human Settlements Program. We work, or our main agenda mandate relates to the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically the Sustainable Development Goal 11, which refers to sustainable cities and sustainable communities, very much at the center, at the core of what we are discussing today, as well as the New Urban Agenda. The New Urban Agenda is a document that was approved, developed at Quito in the Habitat 3 conference, and it is the guidance that we use as a way to know what is the content, what are the aspects of sustainable urban regeneration and housing that need to be included and that have been agreed by member states, by the different stakeholders that joined the Habitat 3 conference. So we work a lot on everything related to urbanization. We work on urban planning, we work on housing, affordable housing. We work on inclusion in cities, and I will guide you a little bit more on specifically the work that we do that relates to neighborhoods, inclusivity in neighborhoods, and the sustainable green development of those neighborhoods. So this is, as I mentioned, the New Urban Agenda, and one of the key aspects that it reflects, and one of the key principles, is to leave no one behind, ending poverty, and ensuring that those neighborhoods, those cities provide equal access to housing, but also to the services of the city. But this is the core of what we are discussing today, is how can we make the neighborhoods of our future inclusive? Because in that inclusivity is where we are going to find that multi-generational neighborhoods are vibrant, that they provide opportunities for all groups. And by providing opportunities for all groups, they will also target those specific groups that we are discussing today. This is the scope of the work that we do. So we are, of course, a global agency. I would say that a few of the dots are missing. We have a lot of work that we do in Africa, a lot of work that we do in Asia, and a lot of work also that happens in South America. I think some of the dots might have fallen down while we send the presentation. But we are very active in developing countries, and we are an agency that is also working a lot on developed countries. So we bring those two agendas together to identify which are the most challenging issues that we need to focus on. And this is one of them, the multi-generational neighborhoods vibrant neighborhoods, the inclusive neighborhoods. What do we need to do today so that those neighborhoods are working in the future? And our agency has a strategic plan, which is the reference of the work that we do, and it is why we can be here today. I would like to draw your attention on the first one, because it's the one that focuses more on the work that we do with spatial planning, with the reduction of spatial inequality, with the development of regions, of cities and neighborhoods that are inclusive. And I mentioned the regions also because it's an important aspect to highlight. I think I have not heard so much about it, but I think inclusivity starts also at the regional level. When we think about how our cities, our neighborhoods work, it is difficult to think of those neighborhoods in isolation. So one of the topics or one of the remarks that we will make later on in the presentation is that territorial component of equity and inclusiveness. And then the other areas of work that UN Habitat has in the current strategic plan relate to prosperity, which is very much linked to what we are discussing today. And of course, as we mentioned, the climate action and the urban crisis prevention. And what we see as the cornerstone of the work that we are doing with our program, with the program that Ian already mentioned, which is our flagship program that relates to inclusive and vibrant neighborhoods and communities, is how can we ensure that we are creating social value for the communities, for the people that are living in neighborhoods. That relates to understanding what are the needs of those communities. We are establishing methodologies that are able to guide governments and private sector companies to assess and to understand how that social value and environmental value is created in communities. And here are some of the tools that we use that link with the discussions today. So the first one relates to participatory planning processes. This means that at the city level, but also at the neighborhood level, how can the different stakeholders be part of that process? Because also to create those multigenerational neighborhoods, we have standards. We will provide the standards. We are working on certain standards based on principles. But the process is something that is critical. So by using or by providing some of these tools, we also want to ensure that there is a clarity on the different steps and how the different stakeholders can be part of it. AirCity is a tool that specifically focuses on mainstreaming gender in planning and in cities and neighborhoods. And then we also have some, like the 5 principles of neighborhood planning, which is the reference document that we use. It could be let's say, a good reference for the development of standards, of later standards that relate to how neighborhoods need to be, which are the principles that need to be part of proper urban neighborhood planning. And it relates to mix of use, it relates to inclusiveness, to social mix, to land use and the mixed use of the different parts of the city. It relates to the amount of streets and the amount of connections that we are able to provide inclusive access. And the last one, which I think could be quite relevant also, is how those participatory processes, the block by block, how digital tools can be used to make communities participate and also have a say and a decision in the way that those neighborhoods are developed and are built. This is what I was referring before. When we reach the neighborhood level, when we talk about multi-generational neighborhoods that are functional, we cannot forget that those neighborhoods, that those cities are part of the system of cities. And in many occasions, in many parts of the world, those neighborhoods are not, you might have heard of this, the 15-minute neighborhood, right? So there are some functions that are beyond that neighborhood. And in order for that to happen, in order for our different people to use and to utilize the services that the city provides, sometimes we need to think also on that regional component. There might be some hospitals that are not at the neighborhood scale, that are not even at the city scale, some specializations. So for that, in order to make our neighborhoods multi-generational, we also need to stop and to think that regional component, that aspect that looks into how our system of cities is working, the relation between the neighborhoods is working, is key, because that, of course, would be a requirement for those neighborhoods to be functional, vibrant, and multi-generational. When we look at the city scale, it is also important to have to think and to have proper data to evaluate how those neighborhoods relate in terms of spatial inequality. So what we see here relates to density, population density, and the COVID-19 rates in New York City. And what we try to do also with our program is to provide that evidence-based data for decision making. So when we are looking at our neighborhoods, we also need to take into account how the different aspects, the inclusion, the spatial inequality of those neighborhoods, the levels of rent, the access to services, the access to schooling, characterize these neighborhoods. And that is the way that we can also provide or create policies, create projects that are going to try to address these structural differences in our cities, in our neighborhoods. I was referring before to this 15-minute city. The principles that are part of this city are mixed use, our proximity, our inclusiveness in order to achieve a vibrant neighborhood. So it is a vision for UN Habitat. Makes a lot of sense. We are partnering with the different groups that are part of this 15-minute city. But what is important here is to highlight that those components of the 15-minute city, those components of proximity, of accessibility to public transport, a density that ensures that there are minimum standards of affordable housing, of service provision, that the municipality can pay for it. This might be not a huge challenge in some developed countries, but it is indeed a huge challenge that neighborhoods are and will experience in the developing context. So how do we develop multi-generational neighborhoods in the global south, in developing countries? It is a very crucial question, very complex question that is not going to be solved only with digital transformation, because sometimes the structure of our streets, of our buildings, do not allow for these multi-generational neighborhoods where people can walk, where there is proximity, where there are nearby services. So that is quite an important question on how the city scale also relates to the neighborhood and to the possibility of making these neighborhoods multi-generational. And finally, which I would not like to enter so much, but it's this neighborhood scale. So it's how, though, because this is the main discussion that has been happening, which are the features, which are the principles that need to characterize our neighborhoods. Accessibility for public space, accessibility in terms of mobility and sustainable mobility, commerce and vibrancy and promotion of businesses nearby, where the houses, the homes. All this relates to a specific structure in cities that applies to some of the contexts that we work, but some other areas are very far from achieving this structural setup. And I'm referring to that neighborhood scale. So I mentioned a few of them, but it's about the presence of public spaces where the community, where the different groups can meet, can discuss, can interact. That is very important, specifically after the 2 years that we have experience of social distancing. The importance of this public space becomes even more relevant. How we can think the use of those spaces that are not used, that can be also places for meeting these different groups, that can be used also in terms of sustainable agriculture, urban agriculture, community gardens, creating spaces where our communities and our neighborhoods can also become united, but will make them also more inclusive places. These are the flagship programs that UNHabitat is working on. So the first one that you can see there is the one that I mentioned on inclusive, vibrant neighborhoods and communities, which is the content that we have, or the rationale that I have been presenting today. And our main goal with the narrative that we were going through is to support the development of the standards, of policies, of methodologies, of tools for the development of these inclusive cities, inclusive neighborhoods, inclusive territories, to provide technical assistance to neighborhoods, to communities, to local and national governments, to help develop these participatory processes to ensure that those neighborhoods are co-designed and co-developed based on some standards with the communities that live there, to create these global and regional networks, partnerships, experiences, sharing. So what Ian was referring to, a group of like-minded, or maybe not so like-minded people that come together and that are able to provide inputs and an understanding of the different contexts that we are experiencing to see how to move forward in the creation of multigenerational neighborhoods. And then, of course, the importance of creating a common language that was mentioned already today in terms of visibility of the initiatives, to create a coherent presence in website of the topic of social spatial inclusion, urban regeneration in our case, and multigenerational neighborhoods. This is basically, without entering into so much detail, for our specific program, what we are doing. So we are working in the promotion of social and environmental value creation, supporting governments and urban actors to develop more inclusive and climate resilient cities, neighborhoods, and communities. And we use the tool of urban regeneration to achieve this. We work as the first part on the evidence-based data with specific case studies on how this is done. We work on the partnerships, as I was mentioning before, and we also develop specific solutions, urban, rural, peri-urban solutions to provide technical support to develop more thriving, more vibrant, more inclusive neighborhoods and communities. And specifically, and I mentioned it through the presentation, but we see that working with like-minded and institutions that have an objective, a mission that aligns with ours, but that also that provides a more specific engagement, more dedicated engagement in some of the areas, which is, for example, the multi-generational neighborhoods. For UNHabitat makes a lot of sense. Our mandate is broad. We put as much effort to deliver all the different aspects that relate to urbanization, to urban inclusion, to spatial inequality, to reduction of spatial inequality and poverty. But we find that working with partners such as AAA helps in thinking through the specific examples, the specific needs of situations such as the multi-generational neighborhood. So this collaboration for us is very good, is very productive in the sense that it allows us to include aspects from this specific agenda into the work that we do. And also, as Ian was explaining, to include from those global agendas in terms of the climate resilience, in terms of the inclusion and the vibrancy of those neighborhoods, how that can also relate to the specific topic that is being discussed today. This is the network of partners that we are working with to achieve these goals. So of course, it's a joint effort. The idea is to mobilize and to partner and to bring together those different actors so that we can work together towards these goals, towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much. I hope that I triggered some thoughts and contributions to the topic, and I'm very looking forward to continue the discussion. Thank you.